Hey there, welcome to another episode of Bound for a Bestseller. I am so excited to have Carolyn Sherrow here with me. She is an amazing author who has written multiple books now, and I'm excited to hear about the process and a lot of that. Some of those writings that she has done over the years have been incredibly personal and have come from a long journey, as many of us experience as authors. The book is actually the result of years and years and years of a lot of stuff happening below the surface or behind the scenes. So I'm excited to have her share just some of that process, and I'm excited to share her story with you. So take a listen. Carolyn, thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So maybe give a little bit of context. You've written one book, My Personal Holocaust, and you have another one coming soon that is part of a trilogy called Dark Heritage, and that one is completely different type of book. But give us a little bit of context around what you've written, what you're writing, and maybe a little bit about how you got here.
Okay. There is a difference, obviously, because My Personal Holocaust is nonfiction and Dark Heritage is fiction. So, yeah. But there's elements of my life and people that I know in Dark Heritage as well. The reason I say that is because the heroine, I guess, the protagonist, uh, is dissociative and doesn't know it,
Mm,
which many people don't.
yeah.
So it's her journey as well as the people that helped her through it. And as far as writing, it's kind of funny because I wrote those three novels over a period of about 12 years. I started writing fiction, and then my mom had a stroke and I took her in to live with me. So it was like 3.5 years that I didn't write anything. So after she passed, I waited a few months until I felt like I was ready, and then I wrote my story, My Personal
Mhm.
Holocaust.
Wow. As you were writing your first book, which obviously nonfiction based on your own personal journey, as it's in the title, what kind of mental blocks did you experience? Did you ever experience just kind of some of that fear of putting yourself out there and putting such a personal story out there to the world? Or were you like, nope, I know this needs to get out here, moving forward full force? Did you ever have any mental roadblocks come up in your way?
Indeed, my goal with writing that book was always to bring hope and healing to people, particularly other survivors or survivors of any kind of trauma. And I had gone through 9 years of counseling before that, so I was feeling that I was ready to do it. But going through all the notes that I used in research and all this, I'm like, I can't do this, put myself out there, because I really did feel like I was walking around naked for a
Hmm.
while. And people ask me, it must have been, or tell me that it must have been cathartic for me. Well, it really wasn't, because I'd gotten a fair amount of healing before that. I still noticed that having it out there helped my feelings of isolation and things like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting that last statement you made. I mean, very different circumstance, but my husband and I walked through many years of infertility. And I found very similar things. Like once I put my story out there to people, not necessarily in a book yet, maybe someday, but just putting that out there to someone and sharing our story versus just keeping it personal to my own pain or trauma or healing for myself, my own process. Once we shared about it and had other people reaching out, often through private messages, when it is something that's so personal and sometimes hurtful, you tend to find it's personal messages. But I just found it so helpful to know that, like, I'm not the only one. There's other people here. That loneliness kind of went away. But there is definitely some risk of putting yourself out there and sharing that you're going through something or that you went through something, because a lot of people have opinions about how you should what you should try next or what you should do next in your journey. And sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you don't need that, right? But there is some power in sharing your story, and in your case, sharing it in such a very concrete way. A book is a hard thing to bring back and pull back once it's out there. So,
Mhm.
one, I applaud you for sharing something so vulnerable, and two, doing it in a very systematic way where it's very clear you walked through the journey of healing before writing the book. There is some power in kind of waiting for the dust to settle a little bit from when you're in the raw thick of it.
Mhm.
So you have this fiction book now that
Mhm.
is in the process of publishing right now. It's coming soon, but you've written it, and it's fully fleshed out in terms of where you're going with it. What was one of the biggest shifts you saw from writing nonfiction and something that was so personal to writing something that was fiction? Was there anything different in how you approached the writing process?
One of the things that I learned was that in order to write nonfiction, you have to write it with fiction techniques,
Mm,
and that keeps it from getting boring.
yeah.
But with the first novel, my Dark Heritage, I didn't have to adjust myself because I
Mm,
had written these 3 books starting, like I said, about 12 years ago. And I was thoroughly immersed in fiction. And I don't know if you know who Nancy Rue is, but she's been my mentor through all of this.
mm,
She's a like 120 some books published, so she knows her stuff.
wow.
But she helped me with my personal Holocaust. She went over the chapters and made suggestions and stuff because I honestly had never written anything more than a short story in nonfiction. So it wasn't a huge shift, but it was a shift. And I recall 2 years ago, I was at the writers' conference in Glen Erie, and I asked one of the instructors, I said, am I going to be able to go back to fiction after I got my nonfiction book published? And he had the best comment for me. He said something about that I had it all and I could do it. I'm like, oh, thank you. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think some of it, one of the things that I've seen time and time again is just, you don't need to ask for permission. But sometimes we need it. We need that permission. So you almost needed that guy to say, yeah, you got what you need. You can do it.
Right, right.
It's interesting that you say that, because I've seen this with nonfiction. You can definitely tell a difference when somebody is writing just purely educational, purely, they've just got their system and their format, and then seeing somebody who has maybe a lens of storytelling and, kind of viewing plot and some of these things that are more common in fiction, but woven into the space with nonfiction. There's definitely a difference. Are there any specific techniques from fiction that really helped you in writing My Personal Holocaust?
Yeah, because it got me out of my own head a lot.
Mhm.
And I was told before I ever got it published that I could do either a memoir that's chronological or one that's topical. And I chose topical because I'm going back so far as to what happened when I was like 2 years old. I couldn't do it chronologically because I didn't have that memory. But
Right.
but I wrote it topically, and each chapter has a different aspect of being traumatized and being dissociative that people can work with. Also, I have 3 appendices at the end of it. The first one is geared toward survivors, the second one is geared toward counselors, and the third one is geared toward church leaders. So I have a friend that says, "This is so much more than just a memoir." Okay, because it is educational as well.
Mhm.
Mhm. Does that answer
Yeah.
your question?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's helpful.
Okay.
Um, as you're working on this next journey,
Mhm.
with these upcoming books. It's a trilogy. So you've got book one done. Are the others two still in the works?
Book 1 is done, and I just have to take out personal notes out of it, and then I can submit it, so within a week. And the,
That's cool.
second one is done and revised and just almost ready, a little tweak here and there. And then the uh, third one, I wrote it all, I drafted it all, and now it needs help. It needs to be,
Deep
revised.
surgery.
But the weird thing is, I remember writing all of these scenes and everything, and there are several, I'm saying 8 to 10 chapters out of the middle that I'm still trying to find. I know they're around here somewhere. Yeah.
As you think through a trilogy,
Mhm.
how did that and you're thinking through the plot and where you're wanting to go with it, are there any tips you have for someone who's thinking of writing a trilogy themselves that you've learned from kind of mapping out these 3 books?
Timeline is very important. I had trouble with that and had to do some, pretty serious tweaking on the first book so that the second book would follow in the timeline.
Yeah.
Um, the first one takes a place over about a year and a half. The second one is over about 9 months, and the third one is over about 6 months. So it was a little tricky to do that. Also, uh, I have an ensemble of characters in the first one, but the second one emphasizes two characters, and the third one emphasizes two other characters. So I don't, I've never read a trilogy that you really um, couldn't follow the characters from book to book. But I have it so the second one is in Kenya, most of it, and the
Mm,
third one is on a cruise in the Caribbean. So, these people don't get together all the time.
yeah.
But make sure that when you're writing more than one book, when you're writing a series, that you leave space for cliffhangers on the earlier books and don't wrap all of it up until the end of the last book. That keeps people reading it.
Nice.
Mhm.
Nice. Now, from the publishing end of things, you've worked with a local publisher here that we both know very well. What's one of the things you learned in the publishing process that maybe surprised you, or that now going into publishing this next book, you're about to kick off the publishing process there, that you're like, okay, I know this now. From the first time around. This knowledge is going to help me going into the second round of things.
Oh my. I can't say this is true of all publishers, but I did learn that if something came up, life happens, that they didn't have me nailed to a date, a deadline.
Oh, yep.
Most of my deadlines were actually self-imposed, which was a good thing for me because I had several things come up that I couldn't get around. Um, the honesty, again, this publisher, the honesty was amazing. Uh, I never expected that from a publishing group, uh, and different people I worked with they were just wonderful.
Yeah.
Nobody ever acted. I mean, I never felt like anybody was judging me.
Yeah.
Which has happened when I have, been at conferences and tried to get uh, an editor I'm not an editor, an agent
Yeah.
or a publisher to look at my work. One time, I don't know if it was an acquisitions editor or a publisher, but I described the book to him, and he basically said, "We don't do science fiction. If you'd read uh, our site online,
Mhm.
you would know that." And I was totally taken aback because it isn't science fiction. And I did read your your website. So anyway, so stuff
It
like that
doesn't
happened a
it
lot.
doesn't feel good to be misunderstood anywhere. So I could see myself being in a similar situation to you saying, well, did you hear what I just shared about the book? Did
Right.
you? Yeah. Well, that's great. I think, yeah, one of the things to just, in the publishing process is realizing that there are things that come up and having a publisher that can be flexible to adjust whatever deadlines and also help you understand what that might mean.
Mm,
If that's totally fine that life happens, but as a result, if you really want to publish by a certain date, that won't happen because of XYZ. But a good publisher is going to have a timeline and a good understanding of how much time certain things will and ideally take, so that if you do have a hard deadline to get the book out by a certain point, you can meet that. And if you don't have any major qualms, you can let the deadlines push, but I think it's important to have somebody that kind of understands that process in that way.
mm.
Yeah. Now
I
I know
did
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I did have, comments from the editor, uh, and probably from somebody else too, and he would say, "Are you going to be ready to give this to me by such and such a date?" And that was good for me because it was a nudge.
Yes, we
It
all need
wasn't a
those.
threat, it was a nudge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need that like subtle accountability to keep
Mhm.
us on track. Um, especially especially if you're like most authors that have a gajillion book ideas in the works, and lots
Yeah.
of other things happening at the same time. Sometimes you just need that little accountability on the outside. So that's also a nice nudge, or reason to have a publishing team in the mix versus self-publishing, is because they
Mhm.
are going to hold your feet to the fire and help it make sure it becomes a reality. You don't get in your own way. So now, I know just from other conversations with you, that you are part of a writers group.
Mhm.
I'm sure you pick up some good habits and patterns from being part of that. Are there any other things that you do specifically to help hone your craft of writing, or any habits that you do as a writer to, whether it's writing every day or doing a yearly retreat? Are there any things that you do habit wise to help you keep your writing moving forward?
Now there's a few. One thing is that if I'm stuck or being driven out of mind by the project I'm working on, I go work on another one for a while. I
Yeah,
don't just force myself to work on this because it's not gonna happen. It's not gonna work well. So I do that, and then also I try to get at the computer by around 10 o'clock in the morning, and then I kid you not, I'm so surprised when I look up later from the work and it's 5 o'clock. It's
mhm,
like, "How did that happen?"
yeah,
Yeah, but it is, it starts out as a discipline. I really need to do this. But once you get into it and your characters start speaking to you and doing all the things that characters do, it really makes the time fly.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And I also, I do research on my stuff. I have the second in the trilogy. Like I said, it takes place in Kenya. Some of the stuff is actually in Swahili. But what I did was I researched the names of my characters and adjusted them so that the character name and the character personality fit each other.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, a little bit of groundwork before you dive too far into things.
exactly.
Yeah. Now, do you have any advice after having written now two, almost three, almost four books that are in the works? Any advice for someone who's maybe listening and they haven't written anything yet, but they're thinking of getting starting? Is there any piece of advice you would give to an aspiring writer today?
I don't know if this is considered advice, but before I ever started writing the book, it was in my head and that was all. And I was talking to a friend of mine and I said, I can't write a book. And he said, no, but you can write a chapter.
Mm,
And that really stuck with me because sometimes you write the chapter and there's a sense of, well, not sometimes, most of the time, you write the chapter and there's a sense of accomplishment. It's like,
yeah,
oh, I can go forward from here.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
Love that. That's such great advice. Well, Carolyn, where can people go to get more information from you if they want to check out your first book and any of the books here in this fiction trilogy that are coming out here soon?
That would be my website. My website is called Chords of Grace, and it's CO, like a rope, not CHO, or that's a bluegrass site. So chordsofgrace.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Carolyn. Your advice has been really helpful and encouraging for people who maybe have multiple types of books that they're thinking about writing. As I'm one of them. You know, there's lots of books within us, and I've heard people say, and you might have heard me say it too, that books are like tattoos. Once you get one, you want to do want to get another.
I have
Um,
not heard that.
yeah, it's a quote someone said once to me, and it will always stick with me. But it's true. You write one book, and often there are multiple ideas that become other books as well. And so I just found ideas beget ideas. And when you talk to people and hear from people who have written multiple types of books, there's a lot of wealth and value there. So thank you for sharing about your books already, your writing style, your writing patterns and habits. It's all incredibly helpful. So thanks so much.